The morning sun had barely risen above the long rows of wealthy estates when the silence inside the grand Harrington mansion felt heavier than usual. The house was enormous, filled with marble floors, glass chandeliers, and expensive paintings. Yet for 8 years, it had lacked the one sound every parent longed for, the voice of their child. Little Clara Harrington, the only daughter of the billionaire businesswoman Victoria Harrington, had never spoken a single word since the day she was born. Doctors tried every test, therapists tried every method, but no one could explain why Clara's voice remained locked away inside her. She could hear, understand, and respond through gestures, but not a single sound ever left her lips. Most people believed she simply couldn't speak. Her mother believed she simply didn't want to. Victoria loved her daughter deeply, but lived constantly buried under work, meetings, and managing the empire she had built. She provided Clara with every luxury, private tutors, therapists, beautiful clothes, but the one thing Clara truly needed was time, attention, and warmth. And that was the one thing Victoria unintentionally rarely gave. Every morning, Clara would stand near the giant iron gates of the mansion garden, watching the world outside. She didn't know what she was waiting for, perhaps something different, something real, something that didn't feel trapped inside shiny walls and silent rooms. One cool morning, while Clara was standing at the gate staring at the road, a large green garbage truck stopped right outside. A man in an orange safety vest jumped down, pushing 2 heavy bins toward the truck. He was tall, strong, and had the kind of smile that made everything around him feel lighter. His name was Ethan Cole, a single father working 2 jobs to raise his young son, Jayden. Life hadn't been easy for Ethan. His wife had passed away when Jayden was only 4, and since that day, Ethan had worked every hour he could just to keep going. As he rolled the bins, he noticed Clara standing silently, her blonde hair falling neatly over her small pink dress. She watched him without blinking, curious about this man who didn't look like anyone inside her world. "Good morning," Ethan said with a smile, even though he knew she wouldn't reply. He didn't expect a word, but the way she looked at him made him pause. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't confused. She just looked interested. Clara lifted her hand slowly and waved. It was the first time she had ever waved to someone outside the mansion. Ethan smiled even wider. "Well, aren't you polite?" he chuckled softly before returning to his work. Clara watched until the truck left. For the first time in a long time, she felt something inside her chest, a warm spark she didn't understand. The next day, she waited at the gate again, and the truck came again, and Ethan waved first this time. Days passed, and the silent little girl and the hard-working trash collector formed a strange but gentle connection. She would bring him a small flower from the garden. He would show her simple tricks, like balancing a trash bin lid on his finger or making funny faces that made her shoulders shake with silent laughter. Ethan never treated her like a billionaire's child. He treated her like a regular kid, and Clara loved that more than anything. One morning, Ethan arrived later than usual. When he climbed down from the truck, he looked tired, as if he hadn't slept all night. Clara watched him closely, her eyes full of worry. Ethan leaned against a bin for a moment. "Rough night," he whispered mostly to himself. Jayden had a high fever. "Hospital bills again?" He shook his head and forced himself to smile at Clara, not wanting to worry her. But Clara's small fingers tugged gently on his sleeve. She pointed to herself, then to him, then placed her hand on her heart, asking if he was okay. Ethan understood the gesture, and for a moment his eyes softened. "I'm all right, sweetheart. Just tired. Life gets heavy sometimes." Clara reached into her dress pocket and pulled out a tiny seashell. She had kept since she was 3. It was her favorite thing in the world, the only object she kept with her at all times. She placed it in Ethan's calloused hand and nodded firmly, as if telling him he wasn't alone. Ethan froze. The gesture hit him in a place too deep to explain. "Thank you," he whispered. "This means more than you know." But not everything remained peaceful. When Victoria discovered that her daughter had been spending time with a trash collector, she was furious. She confronted Clara's nanny, the security staff, and eventually Clara herself. "You cannot stand at the gate every morning," Victoria scolded. "You are not supposed to interact with strangers." Especially not workers on the street. Clara didn't speak, but her eyes filled with tears. She pulled away from her mother's grasp and hid inside her room, refusing to come out for hours. The next morning, the gate remained closed. Ethan arrived as usual, expecting to see Clara, but she wasn't there. He looked around, confused. Maybe she was sick? Maybe she was busy? But something felt wrong. Days passed. Clara didn't appear. Ethan missed her, more than he admitted to himself. She had become a bright spot in his difficult days. Clara, in her room, pressed her face against the window, watching the truck come and go. Her hands shook. She wanted to run to the gate, to wave, to let Ethan know she missed him. But her mother had forbidden it. On the 5th day, something happened that no one expected. Jayden, Ethan's son, collapsed at school. His fever had returned worse than before, and Ethan didn't have enough money for urgent treatment. He rushed to the hospital, holding his son in his arms, tears running down his face. Clara saw it happen through the window. The garbage truck had come, earlier than usual, and Ethan ran, carrying Jayden as he shouted for help. Clara panicked. Her heart pounded. Without thinking, she ran down the stairs, out the front door, through the garden, and straight toward the gate. The security guard tried to stop her, but she pushed past him with surprising strength. She ran up to Ethan, who was kneeling on the ground, terrified for his son. Clara knelt beside Jayden, touching his forehead, her small hands trembling. And then something happened that shook the entire world around her. Her lips parted. Her voice broke free. It was soft, shaky, but real. She whispered, "Help him." Ethan's eyes widened. He had never heard her speak. The guard froze. Even Jayden blinked weakly in surprise. Clara stood up and yelled louder than she had ever dared before. "Help him, please!" Victoria, hearing the screams, ran outside. When she saw Clara actually speaking, she dropped her phone, shocked. "Clara?" she whispered, tears filling her eyes. Clara didn't look at her mother. Instead, she grabbed Victoria's hand and begged, "Mom, help him. Please help Jayden." Victoria stared at her daughter, unable to breathe. Her child, silent her entire life, was speaking for the first time. To save someone else's child, without hesitation, Victoria ordered her driver, her staff, and her private doctor to come immediately. Jayden was rushed inside the mansion where professional medical equipment was available. Victoria paid for every bill, hired specialists, and stayed by Clara's side the entire time. Ethan watched in disbelief as strangers, in expensive suits carried, his son inside the mansion. Why are you doing this?" he asked Victoria softly. Victoria looked at Clara, who was holding Ethan's arm tightly. "Because my daughter asked me," she said. "And because she finally found her voice? Because of you." Jayden recovered after 2 days of treatment. Stronger than before, smiling again. When Ethan hugged his son, tears rolled down his cheeks. "Thank you," he whispered to Clara. "You saved him. You saved my world." Clara smiled and whispered, "You saved me first."